Fully realized I mixed up these two joint parts after I tried to assemble it. But luckily, it was really easy to remove from here. Whew. Sand it down this much. Crazy, because there's a lot of parts where the ABS is bigger than it should be. If you can see inside, that ABS part is sticking out a little bit. All right. It's doable. I can take them out. I think I'll have to scoot over. Can't really see the kit to talk about it. I will be reviewing the Mechanicore Ziegler, mostly focusing on the build process. I think that's what most people will be interested in. I'll be talking about 1, the overall pros and cons, 2, difficulties in the build, 3, articulation, 4, gimmicks, and 5, overall build tips. The Mechanicore Ziegler has an excellent design and details, very bulky proportions, reminiscent of the G-System resin kit designs, LEDs, all working as long as you install them properly, etching parts, metal beads, light and nice clear colors, except for the red, which looked a little cheap and was the only clear color I repainted. A sturdy metal base frame, and basically everything you would ever want in a Gunpla. It is also undergated, which saves you a lot of sanding work. The plastic is hard and good quality, not like the Bandai Remake 100 kits. I also like we get 2 of the red runners and therefore 2 of the head fins because it's always nice to have a backup of something that can break so easily. Some of the downsides of this kit is that it is not snap fit. You cannot pre-assemble it and need to use a lot of glue. The fit is very tight in many of the parts, not just for the pegs, but also the fit for the LED wires, which cause a lot of wires to snap. The manual is not always clear and has some obvious errors, for example, labeling the wrong part number. There is serious mold release, even though I washed the parts twice, which causes some bubbling in the paint job. Some personal issues I had is that because I painted this kit, the parts are even tighter. I also have the clear version, and while it's great that I don't have to paint the clear armor, I have to be really careful not to scratch the clear parts during modification, but most importantly, not to cause too many stress marks from the pegs being bent and pushed in and out too much. The great thing about the clear armor is that I can see all of the inner frame details. Also, while I had the most difficulties with the inner frame, I was able to build most of the outer frame without a need for really major modifications. I'll be filming the rest of this review under natural lighting outside of the really well-lit display case so you can see the difference and as a demonstration of how lighting, presentation, and display is really important for your Gunpla. 3 parts that I thought were the hardest to build is number 1, the head. It is just so small, the LED wires don't fit in here. Number 2 is this shoulder laser beam thing, and that was also very small with LED wires, and it just didn't install into like this joint part. And number 3 is this crotch part here, and there's so much LED wire that has to fit into there, but really little space. The easiest part to build were the legs. There are no LED in this. Turn it on. There are 3 options. One is on, one is off, and one is like sensor, but I don't know, that sensor seemed to work at first, but it doesn't really seem to work now. I was trying to test it out, and it is powered by this portable battery charger, but it's just any regular USB plug. You can just plug it in. There are parts on this kit that use batteries, which are the weapons. These 2 weapons use battery. One of them is not working for me. Also, the wire snapped. I often forget to turn it on, so it's really weak now, but basically the LED comes out from here and here and here. As for articulation, this kit actually can stand on its own, but I'm not going to show you and take them off of the stand because it's quite difficult to get it back on, but it is attached here. There are 2 points. One of them is like there's a hook to the backpack. There's also another like peg in there. The ankles are actually really loose, and I really follow the manual and I didn't make any modifications, but these ankles are so loose they're kind of dangly. Some other loose joints for me was the arm, and these arms were so weird. You have to use these nails to put them in, but look at this arm. There's no strength. It can't hold up the gun. On this side, it's actually fine, so I can articulate these arms and hold them at a position that I want to. They will stay relatively better. It's not as droopy, but you can see the weight still kind of brings it down. And I was really worried about the arm here totally falling down, but you can see there is a gap in between the arm and the skirt. I did have to do a lot of modification to the shoulder, and I feel like it is kind of sliding off of here a bit because I think I sanded it down a little bit too much, whereas this side is doing fine. If it does get too droopy over time, I'll just have to take the arm off, use some glue, and thicken up the joint again, and then put it back in. I don't want to glue any of the joints. I did work really hard on this kit to keep it as articulated as possible, so I'm not going to move it too much, but the head can move. As you saw, the arm can move. It can move up and down this way. The shoulders can a bit as well, and the legs are totally movable. Also don't want to do that too much, but it can move at this joint and the knee joint and the ankle joint as well. And the hands do hold the kit really well. They're not glued. I was really worried about that as well, whether the weapon will stay in the hands, but there is a peg and they stay quite well in the hands. And that is something you have to be really careful about when you work with any joints on the Ziegler. Anything that you identify as a joint or a possible joint, double check and make sure you don't over sand it, because you don't want any of your joints to be too loose. I did screw up the hip joint. There's supposed to be like a switch where you can lock this hip joint to the bottom waist part, but I think I missed that while I was building it. I had to glue this joint in there. There are lots of gimmicks to this kit. I didn't build all of them. For example, like the arm can shoot out and there are like these effect parts. I think this base itself is kind of a gimmick because just of the fact that it has like a sensor LED. It does have open hatches. So you can see here on the arm here, that is open and closable. So if I just close some of them, these can close. Obviously, same for the other arm. The hatch on the legs are way cooler. If you just move one of them, they simultaneously close. Some other parts that can open are here. For example, they're supposed to sit in there, but once you put the lid on, it kind of gets like stuck to the lid. There you go. It's out. There are actually 2 spots for the pilot, and I did hand paint that pilot is in there, and also the head. And there's pilot number 2. You're really just supposed to imagine that there's just one pilot, I think. On the weapon, you can close them as well. Also in the back, this is open and closable. You can push this in totally. There are some other really cool things, I think personally. I can actually pull this out, and these are all individual parts that I can pull out. These little pieces are also individual, not glued, and if I want, I could take them out as well. This part, you can also take it out. It's not a gimmick, but if you want to store it easily, this is not glued, and I wouldn't really recommend gluing this because it just makes the kit so much bigger. I left myself the option to take it out. I also don't recommend you to glue the fins. It can come out because, you know, you never know when you want to transport the kit and the fin can break easily. And finally, some building tips. First is to start with the legs. It doesn't have any LED wiring in there. I found it to be the easiest. It'll help you get familiar with any problems you might experience throughout this whole kit. Starting with the head was the worst mistake ever. Next is don't use too much glue, because you never know when you have to take something apart. This isn't a kit you can snap fit or pre-assemble. If anything does fall off, after you figure out what can really stay where it should, then you can use a bit more glue. Next is be super creative with your tools. Having a large variety of them also doesn't hurt. For example, glue isn't only used for sticking, you can also use it to tighten up parts that you've scraped or filed down. Use it to thicken up a part, give it more volume again. Have a pair of good strong nippers. Don't use something like God hands on painted parts. It's gonna snap. It did for me. Our knife isn't just used for cutting off numb marks. You can use it to twirl in little holes and make them bigger. Use it to scrape parts that are too thick, too wide, too big. Have a good variety of sanding sticks. I did end up using my 200 grade sanding stick, which normally would be much too rough, but for some parts on this kit, it's really just the parts are so big and it doesn't fit that you do need to sand it down like crazy. And if you have a sanding stick that's 400 grade, it's going to take you a lot longer to sand something down. You need to have a parts opener. That is like one of my must-have, most essential tools, really for any Gunpla assembly, but especially for this kit because it's so tight. If you want to pull something apart again, you will not be able to do it without a parts opener. I also ended up using Cookie's sculpting tool a lot. The sculpting tool I use to push parts in when my thumb just hurt too much, to push in a really tight part. Tip number 4, really important with any big projects you do, is once you start making a lot of mistakes, it means you're tired, you might be getting frustrated. Just take a break or just sleep on it. Some people have said to me like, oh, how frustrating is this kit? They wanted to throw their kit against the wall. And there were times that I kind of felt like I wanted to do that, but whenever I hit that point, I just put it down and walked away. With that kind of mindset, I was able to build this kit quite enjoyably. I actually really enjoyed the whole process. Overall, I think this kit took me around a little bit over 4 months to make. And that was on top of having to work, starting up a YouTube channel, which is so time consuming, and then just having a regular life outside of work with family and friends as well. All right, guys, thank you so much for being on my journey of this Ziegler with me. This was a kit that I started this channel with, and it's a really meaningful kit to me. I really enjoyed the build. I hope you'll be following me along for all of my other build processes. Remember, always, like I mentioned to you, like, commenting, and subscribing to this channel really helps me out. You guys have been supporting me so far so much, and I just want to say thank you always. Bye!